Well, hello everybody, and welcome back. We're super excited to have you with us today. We're starting the kickoff here of a three-part series on a topic that, quite frankly, I didn't know a lot about until I started seeing all these news stories, and it seemed kind of like a coincidence. But I kept seeing car runs into childcare, car runs into daycare, car runs into Head Start, and it seemed kind of odd to me. I'm like, wow, why are so many vehicles hitting our child care programs? So we started doing a little bit of research and actually found the wonderful individual who's joining us today. We've got Rob, who's the co-founder of the Storefront Safety Council with us. Rob, thank you so much for being here. It's great to have you on. We love having experts, and we're really excited about the conversation and the kickoff of our three-part series here with you all.
Well, I'll run out and find an expert for you because I don't want to disappoint anybody. But I was so glad to start corresponding with you guys because one of the things you always want to do when you're a safety guy is make things safer. And first on everybody's list is kids. And I've seen so many tragedies in the early childhood education vertical that anything we can do to reduce that number every year, that's a beautiful thing.
Well, I'm like, get ready because you're going to have a shock, right? Can you just tell folks like how often does a car actually run into a building, a storefront, a business? It just shocked me. I can't believe it.
Well, we have a database of 50,000 incidents. We see maybe one in 12. Um, we're convinced that vehicles run into buildings, and that's not houses, this commercial buildings, about 100 times a day, which is 36,000 times a year.
I mean, like 100 times a day, this is happening. Like it shocks me. Like that's insane.
Half of America walks into a convenience store every single day, and every single day, 20 convenience stores get hit.
I mean, wow. I still it still shocks me, and I know the data because you and I've been talking, but it's just crazy to me. And I guess knowing that now and the conversations we've had, like I guess I'm shocked I don't see more news articles about this car ran into this childcare program or this early learning center or whatever.
Well, you don't look as hard as I do, and so you don't see as many as I do. But like I say, they say we see one in 12, and for a smaller entity, um, everybody sees the spectacular ones, but the ones that cause $10,000 worth of damage and close you down for a week, those are happening once a day.
So, look, we're all about safety. We're all about foreseeable events. We're all about that ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure or whatever the saying is. We've been doing a lot of work on, preventing drownings, preventing autistic kids from wandering and elopement, preventing vehicle deaths due to hot cars, preventing firearm deaths. I feel like now this is another new initiative for us and really figuring out how do we get our buildings to be the most secure and the most prepared for heaven forbid one of these things happens to us. And I know you've been working on this issue quite a long time. You co-founded the Storefront Safety Council. Do you want to chat a little bit about Storefront Safety Council and what that whole initiative is all about?
Sure. I'm at heart, I'm a security guy. Most of the work I've done over the years, I've done embassies and NFL stadiums and Times Square. So I do protecting crowds from deliberate vehicle attacks. So truck bomb guys and those sorts of things. And in about 2003, I started to move more towards the safety side because after 9/11, we put bollards up in front of every federal courthouse and every, ballpark and everything else. And then once you did that, no bad guys ever hit them because they knew that, they weren't going to get anywhere. But they were getting hit by drunks all the time, and they were getting hit by grandma and grandpa all the time. So I started tracking the accidents. And of course, one of the things you learn is that far more people are injured in accidents every year than there are in deliberate vehicle attacks all over the world. And as you gather the data starts to formulate. And what the Storefront Safety Council has done is to be able to say, yeah, based on the data, convenience stores get hit 20 times a day. Based on the data, restaurants get hit 20 times a day. Um, Based on the data, bus stops filled with people get hit once a day. I mean, it's just cumulative. And in about 2014, I got involved because I do a lot of work with lawyers. I got involved with a case with a national daycare provider in Orange County, Florida, where a little girl was killed. Um, and I mention it not to be sensational, but just the after that, I worked with the county people, the safety and fire people, to do an ordinance to require protective bollards in front of daycares. Um, and the fire chief said to me, he said, we've never had an incident where we had so much post-trauma among our first responders. The firefighters, the police, the EMS people who were carrying teachers out, who were carrying kids out, because the thing that stopped the car was the pile of people and desks and tables got so big it just jammed it against the wall. So to say that I, as a grandpa, spend a lot of time thinking about this, I probably spend more time on it than I should, but there we are, and now we have our podcast.
Well, there you go. And you've got just such a comprehensive database. And one of the things that really jumped out to me when we looked specifically at the early childhood data that you've got, and you've got it all. I mean, you got YMCA's, you got, learning
Yeah, were
centers,
you surprised at how many YMCA's get hit?
I mean, it was crazy to me. And I think, the thing that keeps coming up to me is 50% of the time, so one out of every two, 50%, when this happens, somebody's getting hurt or injured or killed. I mean, it's horrible.
Yeah, across the whole database, about 42 to 40% of the time, there's at least one injury. We don't count the injuries, we count the incidents that have injuries. And about 8% involve a fatality. Now, the fatalities skew a little bit because we see an awful lot of places where a driver is having a heart attack and will drive off the road and hit a building, and he's actually dying from the heart attack.
Okay.
So it skews the little bit, but that's not the case with the daycares because if you look at the distribution, it's usually 60% male and 40% female on the drivers. And if you looked at the data, it's almost reversed for vehicles into early childhood education locations. And the reason for that, of course, is it's just more moms and more female teachers. I mean, it's the population. The other thing we track, of course, is crashes into playgrounds, right? So it might say, and it might be under the heading of it's a daycare or early childhood education, but it actually has run into the playground, which very often are unprotected.
Yeah, I mean, even just that tiny little chain link fence, it's not going to do you much if a car's coming your way, right? So,
Oh,
so let's talk a little bit about some of the unique characteristics, situations, circumstances of early childhood facilities. Obviously you think about it, and I thought about it this morning when I was dropping my two little ones off. It's that busy time, right? It's that drop off, which is, I mean, it's just utter chaos at some of these programs. And
well, it is. It's hopefully controlled chaos, but it's chaos. And I could say that there's probably if we be very simplistic and say there's two kinds of drop off. There's pulling in and parking and getting out and dragging your kid in and then getting out and leaving. And then there's, we'll just say, some sort of a drive-through drop off. And drive-through drop offs tend to be safer in terms of the vehicle going out of control and hitting buildings. Drive-through drop-offs can be hazardous to little kids who run around where there's cars and can't be seen. So they need to be managed well. And that involves some training and that involves some common sense. But any police department will consult with any daycare provider about how to do their drop-off.
well,
They have
and
that
quite
community responsibility.
quite honestly, we talked about this a little bit, after COVID. There were so many things that were put into place during COVID to keep us safe and healthy, and then they all just kind of went away. One of those things was the transition from the car to the program outside, right? Nobody was coming into our buildings. And, I've long said that I think that's the better transition. Like the kids don't melt down as much. It's cleaner. It's easier for the parents, certainly. And as you're
Way
now pointing
easier.
out, maybe you're not as distracted. Don't forget to put the car into park or whatever have you.
Well, and so many of these vehicle into building crashes that involve parking lots. You see people, it's a nose-in parking spot. You pull in, the curb and the sidewalk are in front, and the building's right there, right in front of you. And if you forget to if you make a mistake and you think you're hitting the brake, but you hit the gas, you're over that curb and into the building in 2 seconds, with no warning to anybody inside. And those tend not to be too horrible because the speeds are low. But there are times when you have a drive aisle or an out of control vehicle, and there are enough of these tragedies that you can say this is worth taking care of. And it's not that expensive. It doesn't have to be that expensive, and some of it doesn't have any cost at all. You can just change the way you do things.
Yeah, and I don't know enough about kind of the construction code or whatever the regulations are. I know you mentioned a couple of places you've worked, you've tried to get some of these in. I know most places, just from my days as a firefighter, like you can't just have a gas meter out without having protection. You got to put some kind of ballard or protection around that. Um, the curb really isn't designed as a mechanism to stop cars from going over. It's probably good for what, maybe a couple of miles an hour, if that, maybe.
Small cars 3 miles an hour, pickup trucks 1 mile an hour. Um, my dad drove until he was 96, and we stole his car basically. We looked, it never met a curb it didn't like. Every all the wheels were out of alignment. There were, every rim was scraped and dented. Um, and so I'm a little sensitive to that because now that I'm getting to be that age, I want to be careful. But yeah, a curb is not a vehicle stopping barrier. And if you have cars aimed at your building, don't be surprised that at some point one of the cars is going to hit it. And it's also true of the playgrounds. So, but across your whole industry, and how many do you think there's 60,000? How many daycare providers are
Oof.
there out there?
Well, it's a hard number to get a handle on. It's definitely north
Oh,
of
I know.
60,000. Yeah, it's definitely north of 60,000. I mean,
Well, it would
probably,
have to be, and
yeah.
do you include church programs and all that other stuff? But
Right. And
but
that's the problem when you
if
try to get the data. Like, is it family
exactly. So
based? Is it religious
if
based?
you're a storefront program, right, and you just, you've got X number of feet and you're in a parking lot and all that kind of stuff, you probably have cars that are aimed at the sidewalk. And it's only a matter of time before something bad happens. Depending on where you are, your playground might be around have one, and that might be exposed to all kinds of traffic or a parking lot, and you're not aware of it. Um, and again, it doesn't have to be expensive fixes. A lot of it is just seeing the risks and making some plans and biting off the parts that you could bite off.
So we've been swapping stories, news stories, and other things the last, I don't know, couple of months that we've been talking. Out of all these, and I know you've seen way more than just a couple we've shared with each other, are there any of these stories that really stick out in your head and like you're like, wow, this one they really dodged a bullet here, or this one they're so unlucky, or this one the impact was something that no one would even think about?
The ones that I always hate are the ones that start out for the second time in 4 months or for
Oh,
the third time in the last 2 years. Those are the ones that really bother me because, if you in the whole history of OSHA and safety and everything else, the rule is simple. If it's foreseeable and predictable, it's preventable. And it's really simplistic. It's been around 70 years, but it's true. And, militaries work off of this and investors work off of this. If it's foreseeable that a car that's pointed right at your building, somebody might not stop at the curb, that makes it foreseeable that an accident can happen. If you have a lot of parking spaces and you're in a town that has these things from time to time, and that's every town that I know of, then it's predictable that one will eventually happen. Especially daycares have that problem of you have 200 cars that come in an hour and a half, that you have 10 cars that come for the next 4 hours, and then you have 200 cars that come. And those are the times that people are stressed. They're late for work. They're in a hurry. One kid is crying in the car. Do you bring the kid in when you walk the brother in, or you leave the kid in the car to cry, and all of those things? It's incredibly stressful. Um, and so it increases the foreseeability, it increases the predictability. And that's where things that we're talking about in this series come in of how do you prevent it? One of the things that I noticed in the articles that, because I know you sent me back some articles, you said, well, we should talk about this one, talk about this one. And of
yeah.
course, I'm old and I forget all the details. But one of them was that the place that had been struck had been closed down for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
What do the parents do for 6 weeks? What's the retention factor when you open up again? What have your teachers been doing to make money for 6 weeks? And what if the insurance covered 80% and you have 20% of $100,000 to come up with? These there's a lot of
It
good
adds up very
reasons.
quickly. I mean, not only you're
It does. There's a
scraping
lot
to,
of good,
sure, fill
yeah.
that insurance
And
gap, but then you also have the lost wages and your staff, still need to get paid, and you don't
right,
lose all your staff. I mean,
right. And so this is why, as trite as it sounds, preventing these things in the long run is always cheaper. It's always safer. Nobody wants to be the place where the little girl got really hurt. Somebody got hit in the playground, and there's pictures plastered over the news, or worse, your security footage ends up on YouTube, never to be gone
well,
ever in the history.
Yeah, and I would, just kind of running through my list, just gosh, in recent past year, Deer Lodge, Montana, drunk driver comes in, destroys the entire program, prolonged closure, and a major financial hit for the owner. And this is one where the owner was in, somebody else's space. So the owner wanted to do the right thing. The owner wanted to reopen the child care as soon as she possibly could, but it wasn't her building. It wasn't her insurance. It wasn't really anything she could control. And she ended up going out and essentially starting like a GoFundMe page and trying to crowdfund some of this just because, and I don't remember the church or whatever building she was in. Again, it was, how many churches or religious organizations just work on volunteers? They don't have full-time staff. Maybe their insurance isn't up to where it needs to be for this level of trauma and disaster. But it's just heartbreaking to see kind of what that owner did, and like you said, the impact to the community and to the parents was devastating in many ways.
Well, sure, and I keep saying I'm an old guy because I am, but when insurance wasn't a thing that drove your business. Unless you were in the insurance business, insurance was not a driver. You did all of your work, you made your money, you did all that, and oh, by the way, I need an insurance guy. Not in this industry, and not anymore. It's a major, major, major portion of how you qualify your employees, how, all the things you have to do, all of your protocols, the type of building you can be in, where the neighbor, I mean, it's just cumulative. You have to be an expert in insurance to be an expert in childcare now.
Yeah, amen. On many different levels. Another one, Kent, Washington, dramatic surveillance footage of a car fully inside the child care program there, two critically injured. Of course, the center disrupted for weeks and weeks. Wilmington, Delaware, an SUV ran into the child care program. Chatham, Illinois, this is a sad one. We had four killed at an after-school program. And
Yeah.
then even in Minneapolis, we had a school bus into a playground that caused injuries. So I was kind of always thinking like, oh, it's the distracted parent. But here's an example in Minneapolis. A school bus came right through the playground for crying out loud.
Yeah,
And
I
it wasn't
actually have a
working.
picture of I have a picture of a school bus in a YMCA pool. So, if you're around long enough, everything will happen, and if you're lucky, you'll get a picture of it. So I think as part of this podcast, we should put next to the podcast a little click through, and I'll give you 100 pictures, and
Yeah, oh
people
yeah, for
can say,
sure.
hey,
We
that
can
looks like
definitely
my
do that.
building. Hey, that looks like my building. That looks like my building. Because, if you're a storefront type, or if you're a city street type, or if you're a shopping center type, or you're a standalone type, you have different needs, you have different requirements, and probably different resources. The sidewalks, you don't get to do much with city sidewalks because the city doesn't want anybody else to own them, but there are still measures you might need to take. And again, rethinking how you do drop off, rethinking um, where people park in the middle of the day when kids are in the playground. There's a lot of things you can do for free that help a lot.
Well, and that's one of the big things that we always preach, and that situational awareness, being aware of your surroundings, having your head on a swivel, looking for all sorts of hazards. Doesn't have to be the scary active shooter kind of hazard. It could be the loose dog. It could be the car that's coming towards you out of control. I mean, these are all really real situations that happen, as you see time and time again, and why it's so important not to be distracted. And so many programs now I go to, the cell phones are just they're not even in the classrooms. We're just taking cell phones away from teachers, and I hate to do the bad apple kind of ruins the bunch approach, Rob, but you see how quick some of these things happen. Just 10, 20 seconds, and literally life has changed forever on this stuff.
Well, no, nobody wakes up in the morning and says, you know what, I'm going to drop the kid off at daycare, but I'm going to be really distracted. I'm going to go 50 miles an hour faster than I should. I'm going to have way too much coffee, and I might just hit the gas instead of the brake and end up in the building. That's never how it works.
Right.
But that's why it's foreseeable and not like something that's going to automatically happen on Tuesday at 3 o'clock. It's always situational. But what part of America is less distracted? What part of America is driving slower? What part of America doesn't have way too much to do? There's just 100 reasons why everything's just more dangerous in that narrow focus that we have. Everything's more dangerous than it was.
Yeah, 100%. So, what we've kind of committed to do here, and I think it's a really awesome plan. So, we've got obviously Rob on today. We're setting the stage. We're talking about this issue. We're introducing this to you. And then we're going to have two more great experts coming on to join us. We're going to be talking about really some risk assessments, how you can measure your risk, what your risk looks like, time of day, all these types of factors. And then we're also going to have some really good affordable fixes and things that you can literally implement, with very little to no cost, and do it kind of quickly, to help protect yourself from this. So that's kind of our thought on this three-part series, to introduce, talk about assessments, and then talk about some really common sense and cheap fixes we can apply to help prevent this problem from happening.
Yeah, I did a walkthrough at a mega church in Oklahoma, or I think Oklahoma City suburb, about 10 years ago, and the Department of Homeland Security will rent you a guy for a day. They'll just come around and for free they'll give you an assessment. So churches and schools could sign up for those. And this particular guy was he was an Air Force MP, and he and I got along great. And I went outside to do all the vehicle stuff, and he stayed inside. And then we all met in an office, and it took him like an extra half an hour. And we started talking, and I've got five things I need to talk about. And he says, "Yeah." So I was standing there, and a teacher came in with seven students that looked like they were special education, special program kids. And they said, "Oh yeah, we have that. It's a ministry in our church, and it's to give the parents a break for profoundly handicapped kids." I said, "Great. Your boiler room door was open." And I went in and I used my little pocket thermometer thing, and the boiler was 320 degrees. What would have happened if one of those kids had wandered off and gone in there and maybe closed the door? Oh, gee, I didn't think about that. And then he said, "And then I went in your kitchen, I went under your sink, and you have 17 deadly chemicals underneath your sink." He said, "Are these people supervised all the time? Do you ever leave them alone where they could go in the kitchen?" And they said, "Well, we try not to, but I'm sure it happens." And I'm sitting here thinking, I got five things I got to look at, and this guy has looked at 105. And I mentioned that just because, welcome to the world of childcare. There's 105 things to look at every day.
Well,
And
and you know how it
if we
goes.
could take away this one,
Yeah, right.
if we can take away this one, we're doing good.
It'll be out of the 105, it'll be the one that you overlook is the one that comes to bite you, right? That's always how it
Well,
works, it
and
seems.
no question.
Can you talk a little bit about, I know you're doing some assessments, but you also get called in kind of after these incidents happen, and think kind of about some of the legal considerations, some of the liabilities. Do you have any kind of thoughts or words of advice for some of the owners or directors out there? Is there, and I know we'll get into this more, as we talk about ways to kind of reduce the likelihood or the impact, but are there any kind of quick takeaways about, what should program directors be thinking about, or what should they be approaching this topic with the mindset towards?
Well, I think the thing to do is, do I have a problem? If I have a problem, how big a problem? If it's a big problem that I need to deal with, what kind of resources does it take, and what kind of expertise does it take? Because if they weren't aware of the problem, they obviously don't have the expertise of solving it. That's pretty natural. Um, and having done hundreds and hundreds of assessments at early childhood education facilities, um, I have learned that big ones do it different from small ones. Um, but the injuries are always the same, right? At the end of the day, you have students who might be struck by something, or a teacher who tries to protect the student and gets struck. I've actually, I think, over the years seen as many fatalities of staff than I have of kids. Um,
Wow.
and so that just speaks to how close everything usually is. It's not like you usually park 500 feet away. It's like anything else. Nobody wants to carry the kid in the rain for 500 feet. You want to have everything right there. Again, drop off is really important. So I think I helped my favorite client in the last 10 years is Learning Care Group, because Learning Care Group reached out to me right before COVID and said, "We don't have a huge problem, but we have a huge exposure. Can you help us?" And great people. And we worked with them and developed I think it was a 12-point plan to identify risks at all of their roughly 1,000 locations. And we do that using Google Earth and doing the original plans and drawings and photos. And we ranked all of them basically from 1 to 10. 1 being you're perfectly safe, and 10 being I wouldn't put my kid in there if you paid me. And since we finished that, and right after COVID, um, they've done, I think we're coming up on 240 remodels that involved storefront protection or playground protection. So they're biting off 40 or 50 a year. And they have the resources, right? I mean, they're one of the top two, three, or whatever, and they've got private equity money, and so they can afford to do it. But God bless them for wanting to do it. It's hard to get money out of private equity. Um, but it was that okay, we've identified these people. Let's do the tens and the nines this year. Let's do the remaining nines and the eights next year, and let's do the remaining eights and sevens the year after that. So we have a plan, and they don't buy a place or build a place unless it's right.
Wow.
So we're not adding to the problem as we go. And that works for people who have 5 or 10 of these things, but also works for people who just have one because, it's obviously simple. Um, and I mentioned to you, we'll talk about the storefront safety initiative that we're partnering with you guys on, but I wanted to make sure to make that offer before I forget. I will do 100 free assessments for anybody that people contact you and you contact, put me in touch. I'll do 100 of them for free.
Wow.
Um, and I don't care if they're, big campuses or big churches or, little mom and pop hole in the wall things. Um, I wanted to mention, I'm sorry, it's slightly out of order, but I have become a student of the convenience store industry for all the reasons you would expect.
I can imagine.
Um, and there are 155,000 gas and convenience stores in the United States. And if you think about it, you think, oh gosh, they're all 7-Elevens, they're all Circle Ks, and you're in Virginia, so who do you have? You have Wawas and 7-Elevens and whoever.
Yeah, we just got our first Buc-ee's, amazingly.
Ah!
I haven't been yet, but I hear it's awesome.
Oh, the breakfast burrito is everything you could hope. But the reason I bring it up is there's 155,000 of them. It wouldn't surprise me if there's close to that number of places where people take children during the day. Just, I don't know what the number is, but you think that they're all big chains, right? Because you recognize the big chains. You go you go down the list from the 12,000 the 7-Eleven has and the 9,000 the Circle K has, and you work your way down, work your way down, work your way down. You get down to about number 70, and now you're at 10. And the reality is over 50% of all the convenience stores are one stores, one or two
Wow,
stores. They're all
really?
mom and pops,
Huh.
um, which is a huge number, right? So
Yeah,
there's
right. It's a hard
about
audience
80.
to reach too, I would imagine.
Well, yes, and they're kind of the slowest to do the safety thing. But it to me, the analogy is, I'll bet you the daycare industry is the same. There's a whole lot of onesies, twosies, um, and there's a lot of people at the top, but you end up you run out of people before you run out of daycares. So
Yeah.
I kind of emphasize that now when we talk about doing the site inspect or the risk assessment, um, because the people that have the least resources and the people who have probably the least training, who certainly don't have a chief safety officer, they're the people who need the help. So one of the reasons that it's so exciting to do this podcast and do the three-part series and start with the storefront safety initiative on is this is where our families are. This is where I like to say in the storefront side is where we work, play, shop, and eat, and your part of this is where some people work, but this is where our kids are. This is where things happen. Why wouldn't we want to make that safer, and why wouldn't we want to make it safer from the little to the big? Because all of the littles together is bigger than the bigs.
100%. And we've got some really awesome, family child care providers that are literally doing God's work out there. And our child care industry would be crippled without them. But they, as you mentioned, don't have the resources. Oftentimes it's just one adult or maybe one and a half adults trying to do all this work. And we've been great partners with our National Association of Family Child Care. We go to their conference every year and do a lot of training for them. But it's very different resource wise compared to a
Huge.
7 county Head Start program or a national chain or a franchise or those types of things. So I'm really happy that you brought that up because that was one of the things we talked about kind of early on. Like, you know, we can't just put childcare in a bucket and say it's one size fits all because we 100% know it's not. Just like you're alluding to with the convenience stores.
Yeah, so I'm here in Colorado Springs. My church has a food pantry. Here in town, there is a large food bank, and so the large food bank gets I don't know how many tons of food a year, but it's a lot. And their budget is $7 or $8 million. And there are 300 food pantries around town. We're 600,000 people, so it doesn't work out evenly, but for every 2,000 people, there's a food pantry. Um, but but and our budget is I think $1.80. But the point is you have the banks that distribute to the food pantry that distribute to all the people. It's kind of similar in what I'm thinking here is you are acting as the pantry giving the information out, excuse me, you're acting as the food bank to give out all the information for the people who are doing the retail work, right? The one kid at a time work. And anything I can do to help that shortens the chain. The information gets to where it needs to get faster, the solutions will get to where it is faster, and you can be the distributor for it because I don't know how to reach all these individuals.
Well, it's certainly a challenge, but luckily there's some great organizations that are out there that we love to partner with, and most have national conferences. And certainly the Storefront Safety Initiative, Storefront Safety Council, is going to be a major win. So our vision, our commitment to this is really to dedicate some space online, right? So you can go and kind of have a one-stop shop of all the leading practices and best resources and lessons learned, stories that are being told, and of course, this three-part web series here, just kind of the kickoff to that, where you can actually hear directly from experts. But that's kind of our vision here with you and your team's leadership, Rob, is to let's have a dedicated space where people can go and learn about this issue, but then even more importantly, learn about what they can do to prevent this from happening, and hopefully we can, maybe make a dent in those 100+ cars a day that are going into these buildings. It just still blows
Well,
my mind to hear that stat.
and we're not going to make a dent in the 100 a day because that's about the drivers, but we can make a dent on how many of them are at daycare centers.
Well, true, that's true. And the
You know,
severity, I guess, of the impact of that.
yeah, and my belief is every early childhood educator is actually a disguised safety expert, right? Because it's everything. So really briefly, in 1966, Congress passed a law that there would be seatbelts in every car in America. You had to, when you manufactured a car, you had to put seatbelts in. 20 years later, half of the states had rules that said, well, we got the seatbelts and now you have to wear them. It took 20 years to get half the states to say that. 2 years ago, 2 years ago, we finally hit 90% of drivers using their seatbelts. It took almost 60 years to get 90%. It'll take, I hope, less than 60 years to get 90% of early childhood education centers protected against this. I hope it takes less, but we're never going to be 100%. And some people are just going to say, that's not my priority, or not yet, or whatever. That's fine. But I'm just going to point out to you, when they decided to do airbags, they didn't make it optional. You have a car, you have an airbag, you can't turn it off. Um, it was because why take so long to get to 90%? And some places make bollards mandatory, and there are ordinances for specifically for daycare, but at the end of the day, you got to protect yourselves. And nobody should have to ever talk to a lawyer about this after the fact. I always say to people, I wish people would call me on the 3rd of July and say, what do I need to do for my parade tomorrow? Instead of calling me on the 5th of July and say, what should we have done? This is
Hmm.
all about making it safer for the staff, for the parents, for the kids, and safer for your business, because you can't afford the liability, you can't afford the repairs, you can't afford to be out of business. It's you run out of everything really quick.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I recognize we've used the term ballards a few times today. It's kind of I guess it's not really a term of art, but if you don't know, like a ballard, and Rob's probably got a better definition than me. When I say ballard, I'm talking about one of those kind of concrete. And I guess it doesn't even have to be concrete. It's some kind of a barrier. Typically, it's like the concrete ones you see in front of, courthouses or other federal buildings where, and really, I guess this came into play probably after what, Oklahoma City, I suppose, is kind of when Ballard started coming to be.
Well, Oklahoma City started with setbacks, in other words, keeping people some distance away. Um, but bollards have always been around. You've got something you have to protect, or places where you can't have bad guys go. That's one of the best things to use. And they're usually steel pipe, and they could be very inexpensive. And we've got the science and the engineering down. We've got crash tests. If you wanted something to stop mom and her SUV at 30 miles an hour, we got them. At 10 miles an hour, we got them. But that's part of the point, is it doesn't have to be expensive.
Yeah.
Not for daycares, but if you just take retail stores in general, restaurants and retail stores and all that stuff, about a third of all these accidents come through the ADA parking spaces
Really?
for
Oh,
two
that's
for two
interesting.
reasons. One is they're always near the front door, and for whatever reason, cars out of control seem to go to the front door, and people are pulling in a hurry, or they want to use it as a loading zone. So it isn't just people with the handicap placard that are making the mistakes, but it's the highest risk.
Hmm.
So if you're a small daycare and you have your ADA parking right at your front door, you don't, if you can't do it all at once, Let's do the riskiest part once. That's why I want to do the 100 risk assessments because A, will help the 100 people, but B, we have a template that other people can look at because we
Yeah,
track it all.
and again, like this is not secret. Like we want to share all this stuff. So as Rob, sees more and learns more and gets different ideas, like that's all going to be posted available. And again, we're just trying to get the word out here. There's no secrets when it comes to safety.
Well, and it's, so if 100 people did this and we keep everything kind of organized so people can see it, the next 10,000 can look at it and say, oh, this is what these people did.
Yeah,
Oh, this is
100%.
this is this is what they didn't do. This is what they did do. Who did what with the playground? I got this playground problem. I live about 3 miles away from my favorite Chinese restaurant here in town is kind of up on a hill, and down below the hill, just it's really a wall. It's not really a hill, but 15 feet below the parking lot of my Chinese restaurant is a very large national chain daycare center. Um, and 2 years ago, they remodeled the backside of the restaurant, and there's now a car wash. Well, the place where you pull up to do your vacuuming overlooks the playground for this national daycare center. All that's separating you is about 5 feet, a chain link fence, and there's a 12-foot wall, right? There, if you just are pulling up and you never slow down and you're going 12 miles an hour right over that wall, you will hit however many kids there are in that playground.
Well, and you're in Colorado, so I'm assuming there's ice and other things that come into play at a car
All
wash.
sorts of
It's,
things, and
sometimes a
and
year.
and and all that stuff. And my point is, some number of those sorts of accidents when they happen won't be will be at a time where there aren't kids there.
Yeah.
So you have a dent in the playground, but they'll get the car out. It's the other ones that I worry about. And you know, fast food restaurants, drive-throughs pointed at your playground, all kinds of stuff. There's things that we can see that we can make recommendations for. You don't, it's not a recommendation, is not the same thing as write a check for $1 million.
Right.
Let's make it safer. You know, I tell people difference between safety and security. I drive a safe car. I've got six lap belts, six shoulder belts, and 22 cup holders, and my airbags and all that other stuff. But I don't have a secure vehicle. I can't, the president can't ride around in my Subaru. So there's a difference between being fully secure and being safe. Safety's cheaper, and it's pretty much usually all you need.
So I'm curious, and I don't know where the data is. I thought it was fascinating when we kind of unpacked the stuff about accidental deaths in hot cars, and the data there is pretty clear. It's a change in routine. It's mom always drops the kid off, but today it was dad's turn, and they just get distracted. They forget, and sadly, and our good friends over at Kids in Car Safety, and I know you've done work with them too. God, they've got so many horrible stories, and I just
Oh,
can't
so
imagine being that parent. Like you forgot, and now life has changed forever. What are kind of some of the factors I would think? Obviously, like you mentioned before, I think I'm hitting the brake, but I'm actually hitting the gas. What are some of the other kind of common things that you're seeing on how these things even start to begin with?
Well, playground accidents tend to be the playground is parallel to a street somewhere along the line. And so what you have is vehicle departures from the roadway, which can happen for any reason. There could be a collision at an intersection. You can have a driver medical event. You can have drunk driving and so forth. So playgrounds tend to be street problems.
Okay.
The front of the buildings tend to be parking lot problems, which are the cheapest and easiest to address, right?
Yeah.
If the best thing in the world is point the cars a different direction. If you can't do that, limit the number of cars that are near the front door. If you can't do that, put in some bollards, which for some amount of money per parking space, you've protected it for the next 30 years. I mean, that's kind of the beauty of this stuff is it's fire and forget.
Right, right. And even some of the ballards I've seen get kind of pretty creative here in Washington, D.C. I mean, massive big planters that they put flowers in and that looks beautiful, but guess
Well,
what? They're actually there for protection, aren't they?
well, sure, and yeah, a friend of mine who used to work for the architect at the Capitol, and after 9/11, they had to up the security all around there, and he and I were walking around one time, and there were some tourists getting their picture taken in front of this rock wall around the corner. There's a guardhouse on this side, and they're getting their picture taken, and I said to him, I said to my friend, I said, isn't that the wall where Abraham Lincoln was standing when they took the picture of him in the stovepipe hat? And he started laughing. The tourist, wow, said, wow, Lincoln was here and stuff. It was built in 2008. It was just made, it was just made to look like it, like it should, right? And that's kind of so much of this stuff is just that way. But There are people you want bollards that look like pencils. There's bollards that look like crayons. There's all kinds of
Yeah.
creative things.
Well, look at
I have
Target, I guess, right? The Target
oh
stores with
yeah,
their
I had a
big
school
trademark
in
balls.
I had a school in Virginia, I think it was, it was some sort of a co-op because there were a couple of moms who called me, and they put in bollards and they did fundraising, and every family basically bought a bollard, and for $100 they got to paint it, and so every year that bollard got painted by the family, um, and so they made $100 back every year, and it was a fundraiser for them, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. I like it. I like creativity. That's good.
Well, you're in a business that requires it every second. I mean, you're talking about lawyers and everything else. There's no reason why a childcare professional has to be a liability expert. I
Yeah.
mean, the more we can take this stuff away, the easier everything else is. Spend the time where you need to spend the time.
Yeah, no, 100%. So kind of tell folks the vision. You founded the Storefront Safety Council. What was your vision behind doing that? Where are you at now? Where do you hope to take that? What's the future looking like for that whole initiative?
Well, so we started it 12 years ago. My co-founder is a guy named Mark Wright who lives in Maryland. And Mark was, the story goes, in a 7-Eleven store buying snowballs, if you know what snowballs are,
Yeah,
and
sure.
a Diet Coke and a lottery ticket. And he paid for it and he turned to go out, and all of a sudden a Honda Civic came in through the front door, 20 feet in the store, hit him at the cash register, knocked him back against the back wall.
Oof.
And when he came to in the ambulance, he said, predictably, what happened? And the EMT said, "Oh, you were in the store and a car jumped the curb and crashed into you, um, and you're severely injured. But you know these sorts of things happen all the time." So in his 9-month recovery from his complete knee redo, he started researching, do these things really happen all the time? And he found me because I had been writing on this topic and stuff. And we kind of decided that the thing we could do that would be the most helpful is just to put data to it.
Mm.
You know, that old saying, without data, you're just another guy with an opinion. So we gather using it was set up originally by Texas A&M University, but we have a methodology. We add about 300 crashes a month. It's been reviewed by Lloyd's of London, who was the people who said you're only seeing 1 in 12, based on what the federal government says and based on our own analysis. And we built it up. So we now have 50,000 incidents, which means since 2011 or so when we started, um, there's been something north of 600,000 of these things nationwide. We think they happen 36 times a year. Um, it's just astounding. And the it's not like everybody has to completely redo everything. It's literally 2 clicks on the dial. It's, do you have cars going too fast? Let's slow them down. Do you have cars that are aimed at your building? Let's point them away. Oh, we can't point. All right, so we'll put a barrier in here that'll be effective. And over time, it's not very much money. Um, Sometimes there's an outlay, and that's whatever. But when you do these assessments, you can say, gosh, if you just brought people in on this side going this way, you don't have that problem anymore. Right? You literally paint the arrow, right? Sometimes that's all it is.
Hmm. Well, we're certainly happy to be a part of this. And again, it's everything we can do to keep people safe. I was just blown away by the numbers and that 50% of the time, there's going to be injury at early childhood in particular. That just sticks to me. And I don't want to play those numbers. I mean, that's not a bet I want to take.
Yeah.
You're right. We do get lucky, and sometimes these playgrounds are unoccupied or the building's unoccupied because it's after hours. But that's not a way to live life, right?
Well, and if you were friendly with the people in your city and you called your fire chief and you said, hey, get a summer intern and give me all the data of all the times you guys have responded to a vehicle that has struck a building, right? Not a tree, not a telephone pole, not another vehicle. And the chief and you will be very surprised how much money and time goes into responding to somebody hit a building.
Yeah.
And why are we spending that money? What's the deal? I mean, if you have 5 false alarms, they send you a bill for responding to false alarms. If you
True. Yeah.
have somebody hit your building and you haven't protected it, and you've got 12 firemen and 5 policemen there for 2 hours plus 3 pieces of equipment, man, you should get a bill. So
Yeah.
rather
Well, and
than
then you
get
bring the structural engineer to come and say the building's safe and on and on and
all
on,
that
right?
stuff.
So yeah,
So why not just avoid it, right? And
yeah,
and so like I say, I'll do 100 free risk assessments for whoever it is you sign up. We're going to have the storefront safety initiative, and one of them I've got somebody that I'll do convenience stores with, and I'm doing childcare with you. That's the only two I'm going to try and bite off for now,
Okay.
um, because it's where we can have the biggest impact.
So that means it's a call to action for our community. So if you've got questions, if you've got comments, heck, if you got stories, if you got pictures, if this has happened to you, reach out, let us know. We'll put all this in the show notes. Obviously, our website will have information. Our website, very easy, icp.us is the easiest way to get there. If you want to try to spell it, childhoodpreparedness.org. I found people can't spell preparedness, so icp.us is the easier way to get to us, quite
It
honestly.
just is, isn't
You
it?
know,
And that's there you go.
the only unintended consequence, Rob, I get a lot of insane clown posse fans now, which is okay. We love the juggalos, right? It's okay.
And then of course, because you're a .us, you have the people who just look at it and say, "Why isn't this working?" Um,
Right.
but
So my email's easy. It's Andy at icp.us. You can also send it over to info at icp.us. That's easy to get a hold of us. We'll get you linked up with Rob. We'll get the assessments done for you guys. We're going to start again promoting a heck out of this. Get a lot of resources out there. It'll all be published on the Storefront Safety Council page. We'll have a dedicated landing page just for early childhood, all the resources, all the research, the stuff that we're learning about here as we go through the journey with Rob and his team.
so here's what I'll do. I'll send you 100 pictures, and you can figure. Well, the web people will figure out how we're going to do this, but
Okay.
we'll make a little slideshow. But I'm going to send you 101 because on the one is going to be and we'll do this if you want to do it every month. We'll do a because when the car is upside down on top of another car and the guy's looking up and there's a caption there, right? And if
Okay,
you're a
nice.
daycare provider, I'm sure
Caption
there's a caption
contest.
for the one that's on top of the slide or whatever, because there's always pictures. All right, so I'll send 101 pictures. We'll start the caption contest, and I guess the winner will get a free assessment or something. I don't know.
All right, sounds
But
good.
you know,
Sounds good.
if all we do is make people more aware and some people take advantage of it, there will be less accidents. There just will.
Well, and the other exciting thing, and I guess we'll kind of break the news here today. We've founded a new organization. We founded HeadStartEast.org, which is a new nonprofit. Many folks are aware there's been a lot of changes with the way that Head Start is structured in the United States. We used to have 10 or so regions. Half of those have went away now. So headstarteast.org is going to be our new domain for our conferences. We've been doing conferences in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands and other places, with the Region 2 Head Start Association for, gosh, I guess we've had that contract for 8 or 9 years now. But we're going to now do Head Start East. We're going to do our first inaugural conference in March of 2026. So that's right along. We're going to try to get Rob and his team to come down, have a big session on this, really make a big splash. You're okay to come to Puerto Rico, is that all right?
I love Puerto Rico.
Okay, awesome. So we'll get Rob to come down. We'll have some sessions on this. We'll talk about the issue. Heck, we'll probably go see some Puerto Rican Head Start programs and take a look and see what they're working with too while we're down there. But that'll be a lot of fun. We hope to see you down in Puerto Rico. The call for speakers and sessions and all that's going to be coming out. Probably stay online till about the end of October 2025. So if you want to present, if you want to talk about a topic, we'll have that opportunity. And then, of course, we'll have great deals on registration, early bird registration, and that. So over at headstarteast.org, you can find all that great information too. So
And
how
now
about that?
now you have two more experts who are really more expert than me who follow on with this, and you've got John who'll be talking about how do you assess your risk and what are the plans and what's the project management and all that stuff, and then Ken will be talking about solutions and ways of doing it cheaper and ways of doing it not as cheap. And at the end of these three things, you just have educated your people, given them resources, given them free resources, and started the industry on a path of more safety.
Well, we're all in. This is going to be so exciting. I'm really appreciative for obviously Rob and your time and all the effort and energy you put into it. I can tell it's a passion project and we love that. Also very appreciative to folks who've been listening to us and watching us on YouTube and other venues. Hopefully you're finding this useful because this is a topic, again, I had no idea of the scope and the scale of it. I just saw a few articles. And I'm like, this is really odd. Is this a new trend that we're going to see? And then lo and behold, Rob said, Andy, this has been a trend for a long time. You're just late to the game on this. So, hey, better late than never, Rob, right?
Hey, it took Walmart a lot of years to realize they had a problem and try walking into a Walmart without walking between bollards. There's not a Walmart you can walk into anywhere in the US that isn't protected in the front.
That's a very good point. So thank you so much for your time today, Rob. We're really excited about the new initiative with you. We're going to be, sharing a lot more as we learn together on this. And thank you again, just to your commitment to keeping everybody as safe and as secure as possible. We just can't say enough how appreciative we are, and really looking forward to this partnership. I think it's going to be fantastic. And go ahead. You want the final word? Where can folks get a hold of you? Where can folks see what you're up to? All that kind of good stuff.
Storefront Safety Council is www.storefrontsafety.org. Everything else we are doing comes off of that page. So the Storefront Safety Initiative, there's a click through. All of our statistics are on there. A couple of hundred pictures are on there. Um, I can tell you, if you delve deeply into our web stuff and our pictures, you'll probably never sit and have a cup of coffee sitting on a table on a sidewalk again. Um, Safer is better. That's all I can say. But Andy, I just wanted to thank you, and it's a passion project for me, but it's your life, and it's the life of your kids, and it's the life of your industry. So I think we're a good team.
Awesome. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. Stay tuned for a lot of great resources. Stay tuned for part two and part three coming up, where we'll dive even deeper into these topics and, again, real actionable solutions for you. But until then, I'm Andy saying thank you for joining, and we will see you on the next one.